Now, after 3 weeks of perpetual fighting and retreat, the morale of the defenders had, as you can imagine, collapsed, as Colonel Alfred Harrison of the 11th Indian Division observed on Christmas Day this quote. Oh, sorry, I already given that quote. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. This is the quote I had given before about the Japanese having
Yeah,
supernatural
the
powers.
I think that is when we were discussing the bicycle blitzkrieg.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, this I guess this is exactly where he'd given the quote. Sorry. In contrast, the well-trained and battle-hardened Japanese forces had become so accustomed to the endless amount of victories that they approached the battle with the firm belief that, the guys were just going to run before them. Yamashita applied lessons learned from the Germans about using aircraft as mobile artillery, which proved highly effective in the challenging jungle terrain, where positioning and utilizing ground artillery was difficult if not impossible. Most of the engagements began with bombing raids on Allied roadblocks, quickly followed up by frontal assaults until a front line was established. The Japanese then sought opportunities to flank the defenders through the jungles and encircle them. Essentially, Yamashita executed sophisticated blitzkrieg tactics adapted to jungle warfare, and he achieved devastating results with this. Now, when the attack commenced, it came from the west coastal roads. Japanese tanks struck the 12th Brigade along a 3 mile stretch of rural road south of a tin mining town named Gopeng. As the tanks advanced, small arms and heavy machine gun fire erupted from both sides of the road. Following the tanks were trucks filled with Japanese infantry who disembarked and spread out into the brush. The machine gun fire originated from the jungles, with occasional shells being fired from some tanks' 37mm cannons, splintering rubber trees. Initially, the defenders were paralyzed by the sight of Japanese tanks, but this fear soon faded, and they began to unleash a barrage of fire upon the Japanese infantry. Some tanks advanced alone onto a bridge near a small hamlet named Depang, where they encountered defenders armed with Lanchester submachine guns and Bren gun carriers equipped with anti-tank rifles, which is going to make Swiss cheese of Japanese tanks, mind you. Lieutenant Colonel Ian Stewart noted, the anti-tank rifle made no impression against the Japanese mediums, while their 37mm guns went right through our armor like paper. So obviously it's uneven battle there. I'm not sure. Did you find anything on Colonel Ian Stewart?
No, actually, I did not.
No worries. I mean, he is a low-ranking individual in this, but a lot of the testimony actually comes from him. He had a lot to write about the events. Despite the British lacking any effective response to the tanks, the Japanese assumed that anything that approached them would have the means to counterattack. So they approached with caution. Those inside the tanks closed their hatches, which created a sensation of being in a Turkish bathhouse. As you can imagine, this is the jungle, it's very hot, subtropical conditions, and you're in a cramped tank. There's no air conditioners in these tanks. It's not modern at all, you know? So the defenders, armed with the Lanchesters, shot desperately at the little slits in the tanks, where you would stick your guns out, and their bullets, usually would just ricochet off. Eventually, a 2 pounder anti tank gun succeeded in destroying a single tank, prompting the Japanese armor to retreat slightly to allow their infantry to catch up. Now, on the other side of the bridge, 200 defenders received orders to destroy it. Fortunately for them, the water at Kampar was quite shallow, and most managed to wade across about a mile downstream from the bridge. So you got to imagine these allies are like trying to protect this like bridgehead, and like they blow up the bridge on them. So all the guys on the other side basically were like left to die if the water had been higher. Now, Stuart's 12th Brigade had bought enough time for the defenses at Kampar to be strengthened. The observation posts at Kampar Hill provided excellent artillery spotting. And in terms of artillery, the British were actually better off than the Japanese, even though they didn't have much naval or aerial support. Throughout much of the war in Malaya, the Japanese kept the defenders on the edge, staying very close to them to complicate any artillery strikes. The defenders often attempted to withdraw to create space for artillery bombardments, only to have the Japanese quickly pounce on them. However, Kampar offered sweeping fields of fire, providing much more room for maneuverability. The defenders' line at Kampar resembled a goose egg on the map, with a all-around defensive perimeter surrounded around Kampar Hill. Their artillery was concealed amongst the greenery, with 200 rounds of neatly stacked ammunition beside each gun. The 15th and 6th Brigades occupied the low ground, where the road and railway ran alongside the hill and throughout the town. And I don't believe you found any information on Major General Saburo Kawamata.
Just a very little bit beyond the
Okay.
fact that he was executed for war crimes after the war. But
Yeah.
he wasn't really, I would say, a guy at the senior post that had combat experience. This was one of the only times he would be doing it because from his history, you know, 1937 to 38, he was a senior staff officer in the Ministry of War.
Hmm.
Then, continues to do that with the China Army. So between 1941, March 1941, sorry, yeah, March 1941 to pretty much end of 1942, sorry, May 1942. He commands the 213th Infantry Regiment, and then, as we see in this campaign, he is commanding the 9th Infantry Brigade.
Hmm. Okay.
And after this, his command roles really ends because for the rest of the war, he is mostly serving in Indochina and the garrison command as the chief of staff, and even for the home defense of Honshu, he's the chief of staff of the 59th Army.
Hmm. Fair enough.
So this was like literally his real combat that you would see as a general.
Hmm. All right. So it is going to be him who's leading the attack upon Kampar with his 9th Brigade. Now, on December the 31st, he initiated a probe against the 28th Gurkha Brigade, which had entrenched themselves in some scrub on the hill. Once the Japanese pinpointed the Gurkhas' location, they began shelling them with howitzers. However, this revealed their positions, allowing the defenders to retaliate with artillery fire, which proved very effective in repelling the Japanese advances. At about midnight on New Year's Eve, Lieutenant Colonel Augustus Murdoch, commanding the 155th Field Regiment, ordered a 12-gun salute fired at the Japanese, kind of as a cheeky gesture.